Okay, you guys, this conversation has been, I'm going to go ahead and say it, years in the making. I am sitting down with someone who I have wanted to meet for truly ever. Liz Bohannon, welcome to Girls Nights.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
This is so fun. Okay, so for women who haven't been following along with you forever, as I have been, tell us who you are, what you do, and a fun fact about yourself.
Ooh, okay. So my name is Liz. How would I describe myself? I think I'm at a point where I'm saying I am a serial entrepreneur. I have built some companies in the past. Maybe I should say I'm serial entrepreneurial. That might actually be a better description for what I do. So my job and my life encompasses everything from building companies. I do some coaching and consulting and creative work. I'm a public speaker, an author, a podcast host. I have 3 little boys under the age of 8. So my house is an absolute zoo. I'm married to my best friend and pseudo college sweetheart. And I live in Portland, Oregon, where I have lived now for, probably coming up on 13 or 14 years, originally from the Midwest, but this is very much so home. And speaking of home, I'll tell you that my fun fact is that I live on what I half jokingly refer to as an urban commune up here in Portland, Oregon.
I need to know more about that yesterday. Tell me more.
We could have you don't want to, if you open up this can of worms, I'm just going to tell you, you're going to have a hard time getting the lid back on because I could share a lot with you about it. But kind of the high level, if you just took a snapshot of where we are today, is about a decade ago, started kind of thinking and dreaming about what intentional and proximate community would look like here in the, 2020s in modern America. And really started kind of dreaming and working on that with a group of friends. We ended up basically buying a property together and building. We started out with 3 kind of skinny homes jammed onto one property so we could share proximate community. And since then has really been a process of just building and bringing other people into that community. So living truly proximate, we share a backyard, but also even more beyond the geography, just really intentionally. How do we care for and tend to and prioritize our relationships and friendships in a way that I think is a lot more similar to how most people in the world live and how we've lived throughout human history, but here in modern America seems quite extreme and novel. But it's not really. That's the secret. It's not really, but I understand in our subtext it is. And that's a really important part of my life.
I love that so much. And I love it specifically. I don't know if we've talked about this. I had a book come out in April. And one of the things that we talk about is called Create a Life You Love. And it's about how the world has so many expectations for what our life looks like. And we grow up sort of following our parents or following kind of whoever is in front of us. And we feel like that's the life template we're supposed to fit ourselves into, and how that doesn't work for so many of us. One of the things, though, that I've found in my life, I'm a firstborn type A rule follower with anxiety. So decision making and making my own decisions has always been really hard for me. But one of the things that has set me free so much is getting to see examples of people living differently. Because it's I didn't even have a category for that. I didn't even know that was an option. And I truly have joked with friends about we need to live in a commune. And now I'm no, okay. Okay, we're going to need to really talk about this.
So what you actually just said means so much to me, and it's really impactful, informative for my own thought process, because something I've been kind of wrestling through over the last really probably year or two. A lot of my work and speaking and research has been around social health, how to build quality, committed relationships and community and connection. And I've really wrestled through, how do I share my own life in that without making people, what I don't want to do is to contribute to the loneliness epidemic of look at somebody else on the internet who has it together, who has friends, who does have the support and the connection they need. And then I walk away feeling even more like people have it together and I don't. I feel very sensitive to not wanting to contribute to that narrative and kind of going, I only want to show up if I believe that it's helpful.
Yeah.
But I had actually the pastor of my church recently asked me to give a sermon at church about community and connection. And he was like, I really want you to share about what you and your friends are doing. And I kind of pushed back a little bit. And I was like, I don't really want to, because I don't want to contribute to this, sense of like, one, I don't want it to feel formulaic or like, look at us or look what we've done, or this is the prescription for how to do life well together. And he really gently but firmly pushed back on me. And he was like, what I don't think you're understanding is that like most people, 90% of people don't actually possess an imagination for the way something could be. And it's really, really helpful to have their imagination inspired, because it's a lot easier to be an editor than it is to be a creator. And he's like, I think you need to start thinking about your story as potentially just you're adding a multiple choice option for people that they might not get to on their own. And I feel like that's really what you just reflected back, that it's just like, if you tend to be more like, this is the script that was handed to me, these were the options that were handed to me, which I do think most people kind of operate more in that space, how helpful it can be to just go, oh, wait, what? That's new multiple choice option. That's something. And so that is really encouraging to me. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, man. Okay. I'm sitting here wrestling because I'm like, Stephanie, I want to talk, like, well, we have a plan. We talked about this as we were getting started. We're like, okay, we need to have 5 different conversations about 5 different things. So Liz, I'm going to like put you on the spot and insist that you come back to Girls Night to talk about this more. Can we do that?
Done. I love being put on the spot, and the answer is yes. So there we go.
Perfect. Okay, so you guys, we'll circle back to this. But I have been wanting to talk to you since your book. You have a book called Beginner's Pluck, which the cover is one of my favorite book covers that has ever been. It is like truly.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
knowing what I know about you and your style and your eye, that means so much to me. So thank you.
It is so fun. It is, oh my gosh, it's so fun. Yes, aesthetically, I'm like, everything that you do, I'm like, that is so fun. So you guys will have to go look it up. But I have so many questions for you as a serial entrepreneurial person.
We have to have the highest percentage of people in any profession that can't spell their profession. I still can't spell entrepreneur, and I've been at it for 15 years.
It's really hard. It's really hard. And, getting to Spain, I'm like, both me and my husband have been like looking up and practicing how to say what we do, because explaining my podcast, explaining Girls Night in English is one thing and is hard. Explaining what you do is hard. Explaining it in Spanish, I'm like, okay, so this is hard. So yeah, it's spelling it, who even knows? But I know that you are someone who you've built things, you've dreamed big dreams, you've taken really big chances, and I want to hear I want to hear more of your story of what that's looked like. So, kind of to back up to wherever you want to back up to, tell us like what this journey has looked like for you of dreaming dreams and bringing them to life.
Yeah. So if we kind of want to start with the one of the main narratives of Beginner's Pluck, really starts pretty early on in my vocational journey. I studied journalism.
Same.
And got my graduate degree. You did?
Yes, I did.
Okay, there you go.
Yes,
I'll ask you where you went to school later. So I went to the University of Missouri and studied journalism. Got my master's degree. And, when you're in grad school, things only get kind of more idealistic, more academic, more really research-based. And I had some interests that were really emerging for me, specifically around women and girls, global extreme poverty, gender disparity, and specifically the impact of all of those things on women and girls living in the extreme poverty bracket and in conflict and post-conflict zones. Woo, that was a mouthful. But that was like me in grad school, like I'm interested about this, I care about this. And so I graduated from college and applied for all manner of jobs that I thought would be amazing. Working for big humanitarian organizations, different, publications, places where I could go write, research, learn, and tell the world about, these issues and hopefully make a dent for the better. Okay, well, it turns out like New York Times not super interested in hiring like a 22-year-old who's like never left the United States of America to be like an international reporter. Okay. So, and so was basically nobody else was either. Like just nobody answered my emails. So that was awesome. So I got a job at a big corporate communications firm. It was honestly like the best, maybe one of the only jobs I got offered. And so I'm like 3 months in and it's just like pretty corporate. I'm working in the corporate social responsibility department. So I was like mildly interested in that. Like, how can corporations use their resources for good in the world? But it was pretty tangential. And I'm like sitting at my desk 3 months in, and I have this moment. And this moment is, I'm like doing research for a client, but this is a very tangential thought of, man, you say you're passionate about something. Like when people ask, like, what are you interested in? What are you passionate about? It would have been so easy for me to rattle off what I already did. Like women and girls living in the global extreme bracket and blah, blah, blah. You say you're passionate about this thing. Okay. You're several months out of college, like quick snapshot of your life. If somebody just looked at your life today, where you're living, who your friends are, what your community looks like, who you spend time with, where you're working, what you do for 8 hours a day, would they be able to tell that's what you're like passionate about? And the answer was like unequivocally no. It was unequivocally no. And specifically what felt most convicting for me around that was the relational and community element, where I was like, you say you care about women and girls living in global extreme poverty. The reality is you don't have one single friend or relationship with somebody who's experienced that reality. And so I realized that there was kind of this delta between what I said I cared about, my passions, my interest, and my life, and specifically my relationships and my community and my friends. And so in that moment, all of a sudden, like this huge, overwhelming issue of like global extreme poverty or like global gender disparity, which can feel so big and overwhelming, became like my focus became so narrow. And it was literally like, okay, close the gap then. Like if you say you really care about that, you should probably have a couple of friends that you're like learning from and doing life with that are impacted by the things that you say you care about. And so my whole life mission at that point became like literally my goal in life was like, go make one single friend. Go make one friend with one girl who grew up being impacted by the issues you say you care about. And that's what I did. I put in my 2 weeks notice at this corporate communications firm, and I bought a one-way plane ticket to Uganda. Had never really traveled before in my life, all with like the singular goal of like, go make a friend and then see what happens. And so that's what I did.
Okay, keep going. That's so cool. That is so cool. I love that the goal was that that simple and specific. And oh my gosh, that's so good. Okay, keep going.
One of the key principles of Beginner's Pluck. So the book that I wrote is like, yes, it's about my entrepreneurial journey, but really the thesis of the book is that each and every one of us should be putting some intentional effort into showing up and thinking like a beginner. So if you are actually a beginner, I have a theory that there are things that you do naturally that actually are not a liability, they're an asset for becoming creative and innovative. And like the way that you just naturally are going to show up in the world if it's your first round isn't something to be ashamed of. And you shouldn't fake it until you make it. You should actually understand that being a beginner can be a superpower. And if you're an expert, you're a leader, you're 15, 30 years in, it would really behoove you to intentionally try to channel your inner beginner and get back to some of those ways that you probably more naturally showed up. And one of those principles of Beginner's Pluck, a very important one, is that I think that beginners have this magical ability to give themselves permission to dream small dreams, but then take their small dreams really seriously and invest in them and commit to them like we invest in and commit to big dreams that we know sound big and important and impressive to everybody else around us. And the further along we get and the more we become experts or leaders or people who do big things, the less and less we start to believe in our small dreams. And the less and less action we take towards them because we are really concerned with what other people think. Is it big enough? Is it impressive enough? I'm going to hide it until it is big or impressive. And so I think one of the magical things that beginners do is they don't know any better. So for me, it was like this transformative moment was going like, what if you don't have to go out and solve poverty for 100 million women and girls globally? Like, what if the dream of making one single friend is a big enough, important enough, impressive enough dream that you could literally orient your life around it, which is what I did. And so giving yourself permission to dream small, but then here's the key. Giving your small dreams big dream energy is kind of a key hallmark of channeling your inner beginner and kind of showing up in that way. And so that's what I did. I showed up in Uganda and I literally had no plan, no money, no job, no KPIs other than make a friend. Like, we're going to call this little detour a success if you come home having made one friend. And that was really my like genuine take. I just like showed up and started wandering the streets, making friends. And turns out I ended up making a handful of friends, a little overachiever here. Set out to make one, made a few. Okay, not to brag. But I ended up getting really connected with and building friendship with a specific group of young women who were top 5% of students in the country academically, but all came from backgrounds of very extreme poverty. And so here's a small group of women who are testing in to the best colleges in the country, but they can't afford to go. And they're going back home to their villages during this 9-month gap in between high school and university. And two things are happening. One, they can't find jobs. And any jobs that do exist probably are defaulting to the boys. And two, they lose a lot of the social support and connection that they've had over the last 2 years at this basically like what we would call a boarding school with 25 other really bright, really ambitious, really like-minded young women. They're going back home to their villages where they might be the only girls who have even graduated from high school, let alone who have aspirations of university. So there's a ton of social pressure for them to stop their academic journey, get married, start having kids, even if it's against their will. So all of a sudden, like this huge global, very overwhelming issue, again, became pretty narrow. It was like, okay, 100 million girls don't have access to school, but okay, there's 25 right here that are so wicked smart and so ambitious and so academically equipped, but there's this real tricky 9-month situation. We got to figure out how to bridge that gap. And so that's what I kind of started tinkering on and just asking questions about how do we do this? How do we bridge this gap? I tried a lot of different things. And Stephanie, they all failed. Like I tried to start a chicken farm. I tried to start a nonprofit, just like kept going down this path and then would be like, this doesn't make sense. Or like in the case of the chickens, like, I don't want to run. I don't like chickens. Like this, I can't wake up every day and know that what's ahead of me is like chickens. Like this is not who God made me to be.
Yeah.
And
Team
so
know thyself.
I am just like tinkering because for me, and this is another principle of Beginner's Pluck, for me, I was married to the problem. I was in an open relationship with the solution. So it was like the problem was keep these women together, living in community, earning an income to go to college. That was the problem. The solution, nonprofit, chicken farm, fashion brand, didn't matter. It was like staying really laser focused on what's the best way to solve this problem. And it really gave me a sense of flexibility with like, I didn't come to Africa being like, I want to start a fashion brand or I'm a chicken farmer and I need to see those dreams realized. It really was, I came with a sense of curiosity. I learned about a very specific problem. I married that problem. And then I was like, great, let's keep iterating and keep experimenting on the solution until something feels like it has a chance to solve the problem. And turns out that was sandals. I did not see that coming. No interest in fashion, no background in fashion. I was, if anything, like kind of anti-fashion. Like I was like a crunchy journalism kid who like cared about humanitarian things, like just like thrifted and did not have good style and was almost kind of like proud of it. Like fashion I thought were for people that was like materialistic and superficial and like, you probably don't even know where Syria is. I was kind of a jerk in college, honestly, is what that sounds like to me.
You probably don't even
a lot
know.
of my path has been the Lord feeding me a steady dose of humble pie of being like, oh, you think fashion is only for shallow materialistic people? This is the tool I'm going to have you use for the next 15 years of your life to do something good in the world. And so I designed a pair of sandals that I thought were cool enough and interesting enough that we could sell in the United States, and ended up hiring 3 young women, Mary, Mercy, and Rebecca, and kind of sourced all the materials, prototyped out these sandals, got something that was like good enough. In hindsight, they weren't very good, but it was good enough, and taught these young women how to make these sandals, and then sat down with them and made them a promise that changed the whole trajectory of both of our lives. I was like, if you promise to make these sandals during this 9-month gap between high school and university, I promise that you will go to college next fall. And they were like, okay. And I was like, okay. And then I moved back home with several suitcases of what I now know are very illegally imported sandals into the United States, and started selling them out of the back of my car. And that is how my fashion brand, Sseko Designs, started.
I am obsessed with all of this. I love all of this. I seriously, that idea of marrying the problem and being in an open relationship with the solution is so is so huge. Like that's so big. What would you say to someone who's like more like married to a process, or maybe it was fashion for you? You were like, if you're like, I want to start a fashion brand, I don't know anything else other than that. Or I love fashion. I love, sketching sandal designs. I want to do that with my life, but you don't know anything else. Talk to me, or talk to that person.
This is such a good question. So I think getting very real about who you are and who you want to be is important. And in my mind, you have, I'm verbally processing this, so we're going to together see how this like lands, and I might change my mind and have a do-over. We'll see.
Okay.
I think that there are kind of 2 types of people in the world. I think that there are people who are here to solve problems and create out of a need to solve a problem or desire to solve a specific problem. And there's lots of jobs or vocations that would fall under that category. And then there are artists. And I think the artists are those who were like, it doesn't need to solve a problem. It exists in me. And the main problem is that I need to see it come into the world. I need to create. I need to see this specific vision come to life. And if that doesn't solve a problem, that's fine. I'm not here to solve problems. But I think you're kind of a problem solver or an artist. And so I think getting clear on who you are is really important. And if you're like, no, I'm an artist, then I actually think you can a little bit ignore everything else that I say. And I don't necessarily feel like this concept applies to artists, because I think that's just like a different orientation to the world. And I really think we need artists. Like we need people who are creating out of a sense of truly just like, this is a thing that is inside of me, a truth that I want to exist in the world. And I'm actually not that impacted by how it's received or if it's working. I actually think that's a superpower of a real artist, is to be able to create without the constraints of like, this needs to solve a specific problem or it needs to be received in a specific way. Hence why so many of the most influential artists like in history weren't even recognized as great artists until long after they were dead. They weren't receiving feedback of like, this work isn't resonating with my community. What can I like tweak or change? And so I think that's really important. So one, I think it's just getting clear of like, who are you? What's your orientation to the world? Because I think if you're an artist who spends your life trying to be a problem solver, you're going to be really frustrated. And if you are a problem solver who's kind of operating out of an artist mentality, I don't think you're going to be successful, and then you're going to be frustrated. So I think getting real clear on that if you are a problem solver, which I think is anybody other than an artist, I think having an open-mindedness to the solution is a critical part of building something that will actually resonate. And I meet entrepreneurs all the time who entrepreneurs by nature, I think, are problem solvers. There are some artists who think they're entrepreneurs and they're not. They might be able to monetize their art. That doesn't make you an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs by nature, the most successful ones, are the ones that actually are not like hyper committed to their solution and trying to bring it into the world. That's an artist. An entrepreneur goes, what is the problem? And what is an interesting problem to solve in a new or interesting or better or more efficient or more creative or more redemptive way than somebody else has solved it.
Mhm.
And so if you are a problem solver, I meet so many entrepreneurs who are like, I'm like, okay, tell me your idea. And they tell me all about the solution. And I'm like, okay, interesting. Back me up. Tell me what's the problem that this product, that this service, that this company is trying to solve. And it's shocking how many entrepreneurs are like, well, I haven't really thought that much about the problem. Or who is this going to serve? And it's like, well, it's going to serve anybody. And it's just like, well, those are huge red flags to me. Huge red flags. If an entrepreneur hasn't not only done the work to really understand the problem. I was actually just having a call with a really good friend yesterday, and we were talking about this. I think the people who are most well suited to come up with the best, most innovative solutions are the ones who have experienced a deep level of pain or discomfort because they've experienced the problem themselves. Where it's like, I feel this problem in me because I have lived this problem. And I think those people are the ones that are the most in touch and the most attached, the most married to the problem. And by nature, they show up with a little bit more open-handedness around the solution.
Yeah.
So listen, I don't mean to say that you need to be as agnostic as I was, like going from nonprofit to chicken farm, agriculture, fashion, like that is a wide spread. Even if you are in a specific industry or have a specific problem that you can solve, everyone, I think, can open up and become a little bit more solutions agnostic and go, okay, why are we using this tool? Let's go back to this. And a lot of times the answer is because we've always used this tool. It's the one that I'm most familiar with. It's the one that we've done, there's all of these kind of like sunk cost routine reasons. And that's fine. That's natural. We all do that. I just think it's really valuable to pause and to go like, okay, let's just get back to the basics and go, what is the problem that we are trying to solve, and be a little bit more open-handed with that solution. How did that resonate? I'm actually really curious, and you don't have to say well because we're on a podcast together. I was like verbally processing that. How did that sit with you?
No, I think it sits really well. I'm like reflecting. I'm like, okay, which am I? Like I would say I would say problem solver. Definitely not artist. But I'm like I can totally see some places in my life where I'm like, I am focused more on the solution than the problem. Like, all right, I have some reflecting to do. I love that though. I want to ask, I know that there are a lot of women listening who are feeling just kind of lost in general. We all want our lives to mean something. We want to do something that matters with our lives. We want to make the world better in some way. We want to like enjoy our lives when we wake up every day. We spend so much of our time working that to hate what you do from, 8 to 5 or whatever your hours are every single day just sucks. There's like no other way to put it. But I know that so many women are sitting here going, I don't know what my thing is. Like, I have no idea. I'm sitting at a job that's sort of mildly a little bit interesting to me on like Tuesdays, but I'm really bored and I don't like this and I have no idea what to do next. So how would you like counsel someone who's sitting in that place longing for a purpose, but just feeling kind of without one?
Yeah. So this actually touches on really directly some of the work that I do. I do these things that I call focus labs, where I bring people, ideally in person, but I can do them virtually. It's a 2 to 3 day intensive process to help people discern and figure out, who am I? What are my gifts? What's going to make me come to life? How do I build a life of what I would say purpose, passion, and impact? That is the goal. And one of my reflections after having done this with a lot of people who a lot of times do come in this sense of I'm stuck or I feel lost and confused about how to move forward. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know if there's a combination of things that I could actually like vocationally pursue that could pay the bills and do, all of these questions that so many of us wrestle with. I want my life to matter. I want to do stuff that brings me to life. And one of the things that I have realized is that we are so normalized to our own normal, right? Like it is we each of us live in this little tiny reality that we have created for ourselves. And because it is the air we breathe and the water that we swim in, one of the challenges is that we don't realize how unique that actually is. And so the amount of times that with clients, I've gone like, read something back to them and been able to go, this feels like duh to you. Like you're literally just listing out things that do not feel novel. They do not feel unique. They do not feel like, they're going to lead us anywhere important because they're just like so ho-hum. And I can look at them and go, I've never had a client who has answered that question in that way. Or I have never had a client who has had this specific mix of like personality traits and gifts and desires and meaningful moments over the course of their. And to see people go, wait, what? And it's true. I'm saying it with so much authenticity as like a third party to go, what is so normal and humdrum and duh, everybody feels this way, or everybody likes this and dislikes this, or everybody's had these types of experiences in their life. To be kind of an objective outsider who can go, wow, this has never come across my table before. This is really interesting. This is a really interesting and unique combination of likes and dislikes and gifts and things that you struggle with. That alone, I feel like opens people up and gives them a sense of like curiosity about their own life that they previously didn't have. One of the principles of Beginner's Pluck actually is to show up in your own life like an investigative journalist. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, again, we start to think we know everything about ourselves. And if we can kind of make believe a little bit and take ourselves like a little bit outside of our own and start to look at our life and go, if I were a journalist, just like trying to figure out who this person is or what this problem is, but in this case, this person, and I'm like taking notes. Just like taking notes. How are they spending their time? Like what really lights them up? Ooh, wow. She seemed to get real triggered by that. Like I wonder what's underneath there. Just like all of these, like taking notes and looking at the breadcrumbs and actually realizing that for the vast majority of us, building a life of purpose and passion and impact has a lot more to do with getting really curious about the breadcrumbs than like waiting for the huge neon light that lights up to be like, this is who you are and this is your future. Go this way. And once people start thinking more like that, I really do notice that unlocks a sense of curiosity, and that curiosity often leads to being more in touch with your desire, with your dreams, with where you want to be in the life that you want to build.
That's so good. It is so funny. I'm like dying to sit with a pen and a piece of paper. Like I'm jealous of everybody listening because I'm like, oh crap, I have to ask another question. I want to sit here and I want to sit here and like, oh, wow, okay, like what breadcrumbs are leading to what? Like I love that. And I mean, I've seen that in my own life as well. And in other people's lives where I'm like, my friend, it is not, here's an example. And this is not like her path, which stinks because I would like to follow her down this path. But I have a really good friend who has just this incredible gift for meal planning, which is like maybe my worst thing. That and running. I'm a horrible runner and I'm terrible at meal planning.
We are going to be such good friends. But our families might starve, and we're probably just steadily going to gain weight as we age. But we're going to be really good friends.
We're going to be really happy.
I hate running and I hate meal planning.
It is. Yeah. I am embarrassingly bad at running. Like it is. Like you may laugh at me, and I will not be sad because I know that there's no other appropriate response to watching me run. But so my friend Heather is just this genius at meal planning, and she is able to take a budget, like a strict budget, and go to the grocery store and figure out what to get, and then takes all of that food and makes meals for the week without wasting anything. So it's like she gets an onion and she knows that on Monday she's going to use a quarter of the onion for this, Thursday for this, whatever. And by the end of the week, the onion is gone, not because it went bad and she threw it away, because she used it. And I'm like, you need to create like an app or something. Like I don't know how you do this. And unfortunately, she's not interested in doing that. But it truly was like, you don't understand that this isn't normal. That is amazing.
You're exactly right, though. It might have taken her hearing that from an outsider. Most of us are just low-key diminishing our own gifts all of the time because we have a narrative. And it makes sense, right? If something comes easy to you, well, what else comes easy to you? Like breathing. That's a thing that we all, okay, I shouldn't, obviously some people struggle with that, but generally we have these, unconscious things that our bodies do. And when something comes naturally to us, so many people have this tendency to diminish it, to go like, well, if it's easy to me, that means it's easy to everybody else, which means it's not particularly unique or valuable. And I am so guilty of this. It's still to this day. I'm like 15 years in, and one of my kind of shame stories and narratives that I have is like, that's not a job. A monkey could do that. Like, that's not real. That's not a real, whatever it is. And that is such a natural thing that we do, because if we're operating out of our own sense of kind of ease, we have equated like struggle with like value. And so the opposite of that is like, I'm not struggling, it's not valuable. And so breaking away from that, and I think a lot of times it does take, whether it's a friend or a coach or just like a third person who can go objectively, that's a unique skill set that you have. Yeah. Objectively, that does not come easy to a lot of us.
Yeah.
And it's not like a one and done. You don't fix that. But I'm at least very, very aware of it now when that kind of narrative starts to come in. And I've actually really I'm kind of in a transitional season in my own life. And I feel like the first 15 years of my career were really like, my ethos was just like if you want it, you got to get it. And it's going to be hard and you have to strive for it. And it's 2 steps forward and 4 steps back. And that worked for me and served me. And I was able to really build and bring something into the world that I'm really proud of. And so that thesis of like good things take really, really hard work and commitment really served me. I'm not saying it's a wrong narrative at all. I am in a season of life where I'm going, and this is where my journalism, like social scientist comes in. I just like my whole life, Stephanie, is basically me being a social scientist with my own life. And now I'm kind of like, what would the opposite of that ethos be? Would it be like pursuing ease and flow and like not diminishing that or dismissing that, but actually seeing that as a breadcrumb? And I'm like I'm like a little bit of time into like testing out that theory. And my biggest challenge with that has been having to reckon with the unfortunate narrative that I've carried that is, if it's easy, it's not valuable. And what I'm seeing and finding and living out is like, oh, that's actually not true. And also it's really fun. It's really fun to be in a place where you can get over yourself and go, maybe this is valuable. And sometimes I'm just kind of like, okay, if you assign value to this, I have to believe it's valuable too. And also it's fun and it comes really naturally to me. So like, game on.
It really is a totally different way of living in the world to go, well, like what's easy and what's fun? And it's really hard to live that way because you're exactly right. Like if it's easy and it's fun, that's probably silly and not really worthwhile. But we all have things that we're just good at or like enough to do long enough to be good at them. And
that's a really good distinction. Yeah.
I mean, I think
like enough to do for long enough to get good at it if we're not. Yes. I think that's brilliantly put.
I want to ask you, honestly, I'm so glad that I like made you sign in blood that you would come back on the show. Because I'm like, I know that I have to ask you my last question and I want to ask 15,000 more. So we'll have you back. But I want to ask you, this is something that I'm really wrestling with right now is everybody at some point in their life has watched Shark Tank, which you've actually been on, which is crazy, is a whole other like journey I want to go down. But we've watched people with like truly awful ideas pitch their idea. And we've sat there and we've thought, you drained your parents' retirement account for that idea. Like I can see that this is a ridiculous idea. Why? Don't put any more time, like call it dead, walk away. But the thing that's so hard is that from the beginning, it's like good ideas and bad ideas, like it's really hard to tell the difference between them. And so something that I struggle with is walking, and I feel like I've struggled with this in like certain areas because other areas I'm like, I'm going, I don't care. But there are certain things
Yeah.
where I'm like, oh, I want to try this. I want to go for this. But I can't tell if it's a good idea or a bad idea. And I'm really afraid to be that person that's on Shark Tank being like, well, I sold, my parents and my kids and everything I own for this idea. And it's a garbage idea. So how do you kind of navigate that line in your own life or with people you coach of you have to really push forward with ideas to make something come to life. And there's going to be moments where there's setbacks where it looks like this is not going to go well. How do you know when to keep pushing forward and when to be call it dead, move on, try something different?
Okay, Stephanie, $1 million question. One that I still, to this day, I was actually I was participating in this thing in Portland. It was called Idea Camp, and another entrepreneur was speaking, very successful entrepreneur, but he was talking about a specific failed initiative. And I basically asked him this exact same question. So I say that as my disclaimer of I'm not the answer girl. However, and I'm still curious in asking other people this every chance I get. And I do think I've thought about this maybe more than the average person. Here's one thing. I actually told my husband this last night. As I'm I told you, I'm I'm a social scientist, but I don't have a job or any subjects other than myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I test out these frameworks. And a framework I'm currently working on, and I've done this with myself, and then I've also used this with some of my coaching clients. A lot of the kind of self-help lingo is really around imagining success, right? So manifest your success around this thing. Imagine, don't ask what if it fails, ask what if it succeeds. I feel like that's the classic kind of more self-helpy, inspiring, don't ask if it's going to fail, ask if it's going to succeed. I am experimenting in my own life right now with, okay, what if I ask the question of, what if it fails? I'm imagining you spend, however much time, money, resources on this thing, and it fails. Are you still glad you did it? And I was telling my husband that I had this moment with an old coworker last week. I was on a flight and this video popped up. I was searching for another document, and this really beautifully produced short film that we made for my company. It was probably 4 years ago. It was in the midst of COVID. We had to launch a coffee brand, major pivot. And it was called Together Coffee. And we did this campaign. And one of the things that I am really passionate about, as I've kind of maybe a little bit already touched on, is relationship, conversation, doing conflict well, the importance of healthy dialogue and not giving up on each other, but doing that in a way that leads to intimacy, trust, and connection, because that's what we're all longing for. That's what we're so desperate for. And yet we're not doing the very things that on the other side of those hard things are actually the trust, the friendships, and the relationships that we desire. So leave it to me to think about I'll use launching a coffee brand as an excuse to actually explore having hard conversations in beautiful ways. And so we had this whole film and we brought together 4 different sets of people. There was 2 coworkers, one was Black and one was white. There was a boss and an old white man and his 20-something-year-old female employee. We had a mother, a daughter, and then we had a husband and wife. And for each of these sets, we gave them kind of some guidance around generative or reflective listening, and they discussed a really, really tender topic, but using the principles of reflective listening and generative listening, which is a lot about not jumping to conclusions. Reflecting back what you're hearing, acknowledging your piece in it. And I was watching it and I started crying. And I was and I texted my coworker who was my main project, collaborator on the product. And I was in my career, this is one of the things that I'm most proud of that we did together. And this is what I was laughing about with my husband. It could not have been a bigger failure from a commercial standpoint. It sold zero cups of coffee were sold through that video. We had this whole influencer campaign. I sent out 250 bags of coffee trying to get influencers to go take somebody for coffee that has a different perspective than you and use this listening guide to guide the conversation and then come back and tell us how it was. Guess how many people did it? Guess.
I can't even. We'll go.
If you're guessing zero people.
Oh my God.
0 people replied. 0 cups of coffee were sold. It was just such a colossal failure from a commercial standpoint. And I was literally having this conversation with Ben last night. And I can, 4 years later, go business metrics, total failure. I'm so proud of us, like for taking that moonshot, for producing that, for having those conversations, for wading into that water, for doing it in a way that I think was really well done. And I started thinking like, that matters to me. And like, I want to build a life where the thing that I am building feels like it's so beautiful, true, good, and right, that even if at the end of the day it fails, I'll be proud that I did it and that I gave it a shot. And the kind of secondary belief that might be under that is that the pain of regret is greater than the pain of failure. And I think failure is the type of pain that like we actually kind of get used to it. Like it gets easier the more you do it. Yeah. It's never painless. Regret, I think, is a powerful emotion that we should actually listen to. And I don't think regret gets easier. And we see that, at the end of somebody's life, like, there's books written about the 5 regrets of the dying. And I want to orient my life more towards avoiding the pain of regret than avoiding the pain of failure. And so I think as you're thinking about something, the only regret, I will say this, I do a ton of like coaching and work with executives, high-level executives and founders. When I talk to founders and executives about their moonshots, about their companies, about the things that they poured their life into, regardless of whether or not they succeeded and they failed, consistently, the only thing that I hear that people really regret, even failure or success, are the relationships that they sacrificed along the way. It's the people who said, I believe in this thing so much that I'm willing to sacrifice these people, these relationships to get this. And those are the people that if they don't succeed, it's devastating because they look at what they sacrificed to get to that thing. And then they go, that only made sense in my head, in my calculus, if my thing worked. Entrepreneurs who are like, I don't need, like, the low-key subconscious messaging is, my kids will forgive me for not showing up for them ever because I'm working so hard and then I'm going to have this huge exit. And then when they're teenagers, we're spending our summers in Italy as a family and I'm able to spend all the time in the world with them because I was so massively successful. That guy, when his venture fails, has a lot of regret over what he sacrificed. Get this, that guy, when he succeeds, has a lot of regret over his choices. Failure or success, it doesn't matter. He goes, actually, what my kids didn't need is a super rich daddy who could take them to Italy every summer. Like what my kids needed was somebody who would linger in bed with them and say longer prayers or show up at their soccer games. And that is the consistent experience that people have, is like the only regrets I think people really, really have are the ones that damaged relationships. So if you're emptying your parents' bank account and it's damaging your relationships, I think there's something to be said for that, for protecting those relationships and going, how far am I willing to go? And asking your people, like interview the 5 closest people to you and ask them this question: how is my life and my vision for this thing that I want to bring into the world, how's that going for you? And listen to the feedback. Because if the 5 people around you are going, your pursuit over here, it's not going well for me, and you hear that over and over again, it's time to reevaluate the pursuit. And it might be time to say, we got to pivot. We got to close this down. We got to let this one go because it's just never worth it. Everything else, I think you can get over, basically. Every other failure, and I've had a lot, the sting will go away. You'll figure it out. Like there's always tomorrow. Everything else will kind of fade into the distance. That is the glass ball that I don't want you to drop.
I seriously need a moment to go sit and just think through. I love this so much. Liz, I cannot wait to talk to you again. Thank you so much.
We're going to do it. I committed and we put it in front of your people so they might hold us accountable.
Seriously. No, we have to because I got through a quarter of my questions and I have 10,000 more that I'm adding as we're talking. Seriously,
also,
thank you.
Speaking of gifts, one of my gifts is not being super succinct or having very few words. So I did participate in that. I understand.
Oh, listen, girl, same.
us not making our way through the question
so
sheet.
Good. It's so good. Thank you so much for talking with us and for all the work that you have done in your own life and for sharing that with us. And I'm inspired and I'm excited and I'm so glad we're friends. And yeah, we'll schedule the next one.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for inviting me into your girls' night.
Anytime.